The waiter approached her table, holding the ring with the care and respect one would give a precious gift. As I watched them from a distance, I felt a calm wash over me that I didn't even realize I needed. The restaurant was filled with laughter and clinking wine glasses. But for me, it was as if time had stopped. I couldn't help but notice the expression on her face, as if she were frozen in time. She looked at me out of the corner of her eye, then fixed her gaze on the ring he was handing her. Her eyes widened, and in that moment I knew she understood. This wedding ring wasn't just a ring. It was a quiet declaration of everything I had always felt. It was a silent warning that our marriage was over. For months, I felt like I was watching a play where I was the only one who didn't know the script. There were endless outings, cell phone messages that never seemed to be just work stuff, and discreet laughs in the middle of the night, as if every laugh was a silent confession. I was keenly aware of every nuance, but I kept going anyway, pretending not to notice, waiting for her to say something, for her to confess, for her to offer some explanation that, however false, would save me the trouble of putting the pieces together. But she never did. Little by little, I found myself trapped in a game I no longer wanted to play, but couldn't let go of. I wanted to let her know what it was like to be betrayed in front of everyone, in front of the one she believed was true happiness. It wasn't just wounded pride or ruined love. It was trust that got tossed to the wind like old paper. I'll always remember the first time we met.
This is your story channel. If you haven't subscribed yet, please join us to stay updated with more real stories happening around you.
I'll always remember the first time we met. She laughed at my jokes and held my hand like we were inseparable. There were memories that used to warn me, but now they burned like embers, setting everything on fire. I remembered the prenuptial agreement, that piece of paper we signed years ago, and now it felt like an unexpected solution. She would lose everything he had lied to, cheated on, and pretended to get. I knew this wasn't what she had in mind when she started this difficult journey. The waiter finally came over to our table. I saw her lover, relaxed and laughing at something he had just said. He was completely unaware of what was about to happen. She looked up, and at that moment she realized that I was there, watching every second, every reaction with a look she had never seen before. Her smile faded, and a look of absolute horror replaced it. She knew that the pain of separation was only the beginning. It was a reflection of what was to come, the brutal reality that awaited her, the consequences she feared so much. That was all she could whisper, and it was heartbreaking to hear. Her voice shook as tears filled her eyes. She looked from one to the other, her face a mixture of shock and pleading. Her lover, perplexed, looked from one to the other, trying to make sense of it all, but unable to grasp the full picture, the picture I had painted for him. I felt a smile forming, but I stopped myself, determined to stay strong for her. The silence between us spoke volumes. I wasn't there to argue or explain. There was no more dialogue. The alliance was my last word, the final point of a story that she herself had chosen to end. As I left the restaurant, I felt everyone's eyes on me, and I could feel the weight of judgment on my shoulders. But I didn't care. All I wanted was for her to know what she had lost. She had given up our past, our history, for something that wasn't there. And now all she had left was her own guilt. The next step she couldn't even imagine was already underway. One last piece that would take away what she had left, the material comfort she believed was rightfully hers. She didn't know that every penny and every asset was protected. I wouldn't let her leave with anything, just as she left me with nothing when she chose to betray me. As I walked away, I imagined the shock that would follow the discovery of the clause that night. What she didn't know yet, but would soon, is that the betrayal would not only destroy what we had, but take away everything she had taken for granted. Welcome to the canal. I told her that there was no room for justifying betrayal. Every story is a work of fiction, but they carry a truth. Betrayal is a poison that destroys lives, ruins relationships, and leaves deep scars. Get ready, my friend, for an intense story where every action has consequences. Adjust your headset and dive into a web of secrets and shocking revelations. It's a really good story. Adam Turner thought he had finally found the love of his life in Laura. Their story began in college, at a party during their senior year. where they felt like fate had brought them together. Laura had a warm, easy smile, and a beauty that captivated him. Laura was a talented painter, and her intensity and passion for every detail, from the way she mixed colors to the way she pronounced each word, was contagious. Adam, on the other hand, was a practical and focused businessman with a calm and introspective personality, qualities that made their relationship even more balanced over the years. For a long time, it seemed like Adam and Laura were meant to be. They had a lot of spontaneous adventures and late-night talks that brought them closer. Adam felt like he had finally found his perfect match in Laura. He had built a solid career and was proud of every accomplishment. But it was with Laura that he shared his most secret dreams. Together, they bought a house and lovingly renovated it. Every detail, from the color of the walls to the garden of carefully chosen flowers, was a reflection of the two of them. But as time went on, things changed. Laura, always restless, began to expand her social circle, driven by a desire to grow as an artist and influenced by a need to feel more active and recognized. It was only natural for Adam to feel a bit uneasy about the increased nights out and the attention Laura now gave to cultural events and art galleries. He tried to ignore the discomfort, chalking it up to a period of self-discovery that everyone has the right to experience. As time went on, Adam really threw himself into his work, because he wanted to make sure that they'd be okay. He firmly believed in the balance they had established. He went out of his way to make their moments special, with dinners, short trips, and unexpected gifts. Laura was grateful, but she also seemed a bit distant sometimes, as if she was thinking about other things. Adam noticed these moments of separation, but chose to believe it was just fatigue, a need for space. Adam had unwavering trust in Laura, but like any of us, he was susceptible to the insecurities that arise in everyday life. There were those rare times when Laura was especially reserved, and Adam felt a little unsure, but he just shook it off. He thought back to how their relationship had been built on trust and love, and that was enough to suppress any doubts. The house they built together, full of memories and dreams, was now a place where a different kind of atmosphere was starting to take shape, almost imperceptible but undeniable. Their deep conversations gave way to short, quick dialogues, and the silences between them grew. At one point, Adam started to wonder when things had changed, but he couldn't pinpoint a specific moment. The change, like the wear, had been gradual, a small detour on a road that had once seemed so straight. One night, Laura came home a bit later than usual from a gallery where she was showing her paintings. Adam was waiting for her in the living room with a glass of wine, looking a bit tired but still welcoming. Laura walked through the door, dropping her bag on the floor and sighing as if she were carrying the weight of the world. Adam tried to make her feel more at ease by starting a conversation about the exhibit, asking how her night had been and who she had met. Laura answered with short, scattered sentences. But Adam persisted. "Was everything okay?" he asked, trying to make a connection. Laura paused for a moment before responding, something he had rarely noticed before. "Yes, it was a good night," she said, her eyes averted. Adam sensed that something was wrong, but he didn't press further. He knew Laura well enough to know that pressuring her would only make her shut down even more. At the same time, he couldn't shake the growing unease. In that silence, he felt like there was an invisible barrier between them, and he wasn't sure how to get over it. Despite his doubts, Adam tried to maintain harmony and remembered the moments of complicity. Every memory they shared was an attempt to rebuild what he felt was fraying between them. He still loved her, but he feared that this love would be like sand slipping through his fingers, falling apart without him being able to do anything to stop it. Meanwhile, Laura was busy exploring her own world, longing to broaden her artistic horizons and meeting new people in art circles. She was captivated by the promises of freedom. While she still loved Adam, she felt that something had changed in her head. She felt like the security he provided was no longer enough. She had this deep longing for something she couldn't even name. Over the months, there were little things like the way she looked at him differently or the small gifts she gave him that showed this quiet change in their relationship. Adam watched her with the patience of someone who hoped she would find herself again, that this separation would be a passing phase. He knew she would return to the woman he had known, and he was excited to share the best moments of his life with her again. When they looked into each other's eyes, he could still see the love he had always known. But this image was increasingly accompanied by a weight of uncertainty. There was a subtle tension between them, like a shadow slowly enveloping their relationship. When he was by himself, Adam often found himself thinking about the choices they had made, the paths they had chosen, and wondering if things could have been different. He felt a kind of nostalgia for the future they had planned together, as if that future was slipping away without him being able to grasp it. But he was hopeful. He believed that, with time and patience, they could overcome any difficulty. He knew Laura well enough to know that she was complex and that sometimes she had to lose herself to find herself. What he didn't know, and was afraid to find out, was whether she would find her way back to him this time. Adam tried to tell himself that their relationship was just going through a rough patch, and they'd both come out the other side stronger. He knew that she was a vibrant woman with a strong personality, and her involvement in the artistic world had always been a big part of who she was. But little by little, he began to sense that something was different. She was leaving more often. Her answers became more vague. Even the casual encounters between them felt a bit rehearsed, as if she were there in body but spiritually absent. Every time he tried to connect, she gave him evasive or distracted responses. He felt like he was always a few feet away trying to reach her, but she was just out of reach. One night, Laura arrived even later than usual, and he noticed the perfume she was wearing wasn't hers. She came in with a tired look, but not the usual exhaustion, and not the glow of someone who had worked a long day. Adam watched her silently as she took off her shoes and walked up the stairs without saying a word. He stayed in the living room, listening to her footsteps, lost on the second floor, while the silence in the house seemed deeper and more disturbing. That night was the breaking point for Adam. He couldn't ignore the uneasiness anymore, couldn't pretend that there wasn't a growing void between them. The next day, Adam decided to follow his heart. For the first time in years of marriage, he picked up her cell phone. He hesitated, feeling like he was invading the privacy of someone he loved. But he felt compelled to do something, guided by a deep sense of concern. He felt like if he stayed in the dark, the emptiness would consume him. When he unlocked the phone, he found a steady stream of messages and calls from an unknown number. His formerly calm mind started racing, imagining things he hadn't thought possible. Adam fought the urge to confront her right away. Instead, he started paying close attention to her, watching her every move, the appointments she had, the excuses she made, the art events she attended, and the sporadic outings she went on. He took note of every little detail, trying to make sense of it all and looking for something that would validate his suspicions. Deep down, he still wished he was wrong, still wanted to believe that the problem was in his own imagination, that perhaps it was just tiredness distorting his perception of reality. A few days later, when Laura said she was at another event, Adam decided to check it out. He went to the gallery where she was supposed to be, but when he arrived, he found the place closed with no sign of activity. It felt like a punch in the gut, a silent sign that something was really wrong. He felt his heart racing and his body filled with a sense of disbelief and despair. In that moment, he felt like there might be no turning back. Adam went back home that night, determined to find out what was going on. Every silence and absent look from Laura began to fit into a dark puzzle. He felt sure that if he was being betrayed, he would not allow it to remain hidden. On a beautiful Saturday morning, as Laura got ready for another performance, Adam watched her closely, as if saying goodbye to something he had always loved. Her voice, happy and distant, was the final confirmation that something very important had changed between them. After she left, he took the car and followed her, keeping a safe distance. He felt a heaviness in his chest, and his stomach dropped with worry with every mile they drove. After almost half an hour, he saw her pull up in front of an isolated restaurant far from downtown. She got out of the car, adjusted her hair, and smiled in a way that was new to Adam. For a while. Then he saw him, the man waiting for her outside with a carefree smile. Without any guilt or fear, they greeted each other with a brief but intimate kiss, and Adam knew what he had feared was true. He stayed in the car, his hands gripping the steering wheel tightly, watching them enter the restaurant as if they were a normal couple, without a shadow of remorse. He felt a range of emotions, a mix of pain and disbelief. It felt like the ground had been pulled out from under his feet. He couldn't understand how someone he had spent his life with could just disappear and act like they never existed. It felt like the love they had built together just disappeared without any explanation, like he didn't even have a chance to fight for it. As he watched the restaurant move, a cold anger washed over him, replacing the initial shock. He had poured his heart and soul into this relationship, working tirelessly to build a future together. This betrayal wasn't just about a broken promise. It was a hit to everything he believed in, all the hard work he had put in. To keep, he felt his breath catch in his throat, his chest tight with pain, but he knew he had to be strong. He couldn't let his emotions control him. He didn't want to confront them impulsively. Instead, Adam got out of the car, taking slow, measured steps, and made his way to the entrance of the restaurant. He went in and hid at a table far away from where he could watch Laura and her lover laughing and toasting as if they were two people in love and free of any responsibility. Her image, so familiar and yet so strange, cut through him like a razor blade. The woman he loved, the woman with whom he had made plans and built a life, was now a stranger before him, someone he could barely relate to. As the waiter passed by, Adam called out to him, asking if he could have a ring. The one he had worn in private since the day they had exchanged vows. The ring was a symbol of their commitment, but it also reminded him that he had been faithful while she had not. The waiter, taken aback by the request, paused, but then, understanding the depth of Adam's feelings, nodded and picked up the ring. He walked over to Laura's table, his face showing a mix of curiosity and concern. Adam watched with a mix of anticipation and unease. Each second felt like a pivotal moment. He watched as the waiter handed over the ring, saw Laura's confused look turn to silent shock. The lovers looked from one to the other, not understanding what was happening. But Laura knew immediately. She knew that everything they had built was hanging by a thread. Meanwhile, Adam sat in a corner, waiting patiently. His face showed no emotion, but his mind was reeling. Laura and her lover, still in a state of shock from the ring he'd given her, looked around, trying to grasp what was going on. If this was some kind of a joke. Laura's eyes finally fell on him. She lost her breath as if struck by an invisible blow, her face changing color as she tried to regain control in front of the man with whom she had shared years. With whom she had shared years of her life. She stood up, a bit unsteady, and walked toward him, her steps slow and cautious. She left her lover behind, who looked at her with a mix of confusion and concern. Adam remained silent, his gaze fixed on her without a trace of emotion. When she stopped in front of him, the silence between them was almost palpable. Finally, she broke the silence, her voice wavering. "Why are you here?" she asked, her voice still shaky. "And this alliance, what does it mean?" Adam looked at her with a gentle, concerned expression. His dark eyes met her gaze, as if seeing beyond her exterior. "You know exactly what it means, Laura." She tried to answer, but the words seemed to catch in her throat. He continued, his voice low but firm. 15 years, Laura. I gave you my trust, my love, and my life, and you threw it all away. Why, my dear? What could I do to change your mind? Laura swallowed hard and looked away, but he didn't let her. "Look at me," he said kindly. She looked up, her lips parted in a silent plea for understanding. "Adam, I'm at a loss for words. It's too late for excuses." He interrupted each word with a pain he could barely hide. "You've already said everything I needed to hear with your actions." As time went on, she seemed to withdraw from him, as if Adam's words were tearing down the image she had created for herself. She tried to touch his hand, but he pulled away. "You don't want to listen to me," she whispered. Her voice broke. He gave a slightly bitter smile. "Laura, I don't know what you're listening to," he said, his tone a mix of concern and confusion. "This wasn't the right decision. What are you regretting? There are no excuses for what you did." He paused, his gaze warm and understanding. "But I want you to understand what is happening now." She looked at him, confused. What do you mean? Adam took a deep breath, his voice more controlled than he expected. I thought I knew love, Laura. I thought marriage was an unbreakable bond. But you've shown me that's not true. I'm grateful that I was wise enough to protect everything I had built before getting married. She looked a bit puzzled, not quite catching what I meant. Adam, what are you saying? He crossed his arms, his expression a mix of calm and heartbreak. Do you remember our prenuptial agreement? Her face went pale. What? That was years ago. Why did you do that? I remember, Laura. And you better remember, too. Adam watched her reactions with a steady gaze without looking away. There's a specific clause in our contract, one you might have forgotten, but it's the only thing you need to worry about now. She began to tremble, and he could see the terror growing in her eyes as if she finally understood the magnitude of what was about to happen. Adam, please, what are you trying to say? You can't be serious. I'm more serious than ever, Laura, he replied, his voice deep and icy. The contract clearly states that if you're unfaithful, you'll lose all rights to what we have together. That would include all the possessions, money, and house. You won't get anything. She took a step back, taken aback. This can't be true, Adam. You've got to be kidding me. This happened a long time ago. We never took it too seriously. I took it, Laura. And now you're going to have to deal with the consequences. Adam crossed his arms, maintaining his composure. You were the one who chose to throw away our marriage. That choice will cost you more than just my respect. You'll lose everything. Laura shook her head, her eyes welling up with tears. She began to speak, her voice quivering as she tried to explain the inexplicable. Adam, please. I was confused. That's all. It doesn't mean anything. You know I love you, always have. It was just a slip-up, and it's going to be okay. He interrupted her. You thought you could get away with it, but it ends here. Adam felt the weight of his own words, but he remained steadfast. Now, Laura, I'm asking you to leave the house tomorrow on your own. This is your last night. Her eyes widened, a mixture of desperation and pleading in her expression. You can't do this to me, Adam. I have nowhere to go. Please don't do this to me. I messed up, but I can't let this go on. He looked at her for a moment, and for the first time, a pained expression flashed in his eyes. But at the same time, he knew there was no turning back. She had broken something inside him, and it wouldn't be easy to fix. Laura, I loved you like I never thought I could love anyone. Now, I'm faced with the heartbreaking reality that I was betrayed, and all the beautiful memories we shared were just illusions. He paused, his gaze steady but dark. You chose this path. Now you have to walk it alone. She felt tears streaming down her face as she swallowed hard, but she knew he wouldn't change his mind. Adam stood up without another word and left the restaurant. She stood, looking at the ring on her hand. It was a symbol of a commitment that now felt like a bitter reminder of what she had lost. Laura stayed in the restaurant, feeling a bit frozen as she processed everything that had just happened. The world around her felt a bit distorted, as if the voices of other customers were muffled. The lights, once warm and inviting, felt harsh and blinding in their new reality. The lover, still reeling from the shock, watched in a state of disbelief, grappling to grasp the full extent of what had just unfolded. Laura, however, had no doubts. Adam's every word had been like a sentence, and she knew that whatever he said was final. The ring in her hand felt like a heavy weight, a symbol of broken promises and a future that felt like it was crumbling. She desperately tried to catch her breath, looking around for some kind of support, a word of comfort that she knew wouldn't come from anyone there. Her partner, already feeling uneasy, started to apologize, but his words came out in a jumbled mess. He shook his head from side to side, his face a picture of confusion. He reached out a hand to gently touch her, but she pulled away, her face a picture of surprise and pain. She understood the gesture, and it broke her heart. Still in a state of shock, Laura got up and walked out of the restaurant. Every step felt heavier than the last, as if Adam's words were still echoing in her mind, crushing any hope she had left. The night was cold, but it was the feeling of emptiness growing inside that made her shiver. Laura knew that her home, The place she had built with Adam and that held years of memories was now out of reach. The world that had felt full of possibilities now felt smaller, a closed space where everything reminded her of her mistake. She started to walk through the city, her thoughts clouded as she tried to understand the consequences of her actions. As she walked, memories of her past with Adam surfaced, painfully revisiting moments of happiness when nothing seemed capable of shattering their bond. She remembered every promise, every conversation about the future, how he was the foundation of everything she had built in her life. The security, the support, the unconditional love. All of it now seemed out of reach. After wandering for hours, Laura finally found the strength to return to the house that, in a few hours, would no longer be her home. She entered slowly, hoping against hope that she would not find Adam, but the house was silent. Every corner reminded her of the moments spent together, the good and the bad. It was as if the walls, the photographs in their frames, every piece of furniture were silently saying goodbye. As she climbed the stairs to her room, she noticed that some of Adam's belongings were missing. It felt as if he had already begun to disentangle himself, to erase the traces of their life together. He sat on the edge of the bed and stared into space. I knew there were no more. There were no more excuses or justifications. She tried to think of what she could have said or done differently, but regret was now a shadow that immediately enveloped her. The house felt colder and more empty, and silence was now its only companion. Laura realized that in addition to losing the material support and stability that Adam represented, she was losing something even more precious. She had lost the part of herself that believed she was whole, reliable, and loved with him. It felt like there was an emptiness in her heart, and it was just too much to take. She knew it would take a long time for the pain to subside, if it ever did. At daybreak, Laura began packing her belongings. Each item she placed in the boxes carried an emotional weight, a memory that now became a farewell. The things that had once been everyday things, a sculpture from a trip, a book he had given her, a painting she had painted inspired by him, were now symbols of a love she had destroyed. The process of packing everything felt like it would never end, and each item she placed in the boxes made her relive the moments they had shared, as if she were slowly burning each memory. Adam returned in the morning, cool and determined. He watched her without saying a word as she tried to explain her feelings for the last time with trembling hands. Adam, I know that nothing I can say will change what I have done. I destroyed what we had. I know that, but I want you to know that it was never about you. It was about losing myself. Adam looked at her with a hard gaze, unable to see the pain in her eyes. Laura, I'm sorry, but you really did destroy me. You made me question every moment we spent together, every promise we made. I'm sorry, but there are no excuses that can fix this. You made your choices and now you're going to live with them. She lowered her head, unable to look at him. The silence that followed was almost unbearable. Laura felt the weight of the physical and emotional separation growing by the second. With everything packed, she finally left the house. Every step felt like a painful goodbye, and the feeling of emptiness was overwhelming. Adam stayed in the hallway and watched her go, knowing that no matter how much this situation destroyed him, it was the only possible path for both of them. When the door finally closed behind her, Adam let out a long, deep sigh, a mixture of relief and sadness. He knew this was just the first step in a long recovery process, but he was determined to move forward. Months had gone by since Laura left the house where they had made so many memories together. She tried to move on, but the emptiness was constant, a painful presence at every moment. She tried to find her old life again, but it felt like a heavy weight on her heart, with the same sense of loss and regret that had come with the night Adam left. He gave her the ring in the restaurant. Every time she thought of him, she felt a sharp pain, the weight of a future she had thrown away for a fleeting moment of dissatisfaction. Laura did her best to keep things together, but it wasn't easy. She didn't have much money, and her friends didn't really understand the situation. They saw her as someone who had hurt the man who loved her most. Every day felt like a struggle, but she was determined to keep going. Her financial situation was getting more and more difficult. Without Adam's support and with her reputation in tatters, she was forced to find temporary work to survive. His paintings, once his passion and escape, now reflected an unattainable past. The inspiration that once flowed was replaced by a sadness that stained her canvases, reflecting the loss she felt inside. As time went on, the few people who were still in touch with her moved away. They couldn't understand or accept the betrayal that Laura had committed, but Adam was determined to rebuild his life. The first months were tough, but he was determined. He felt let down, but he used that feeling to rediscover himself. He got more involved in his work, made new contacts, and gradually rebuilt a routine free from the remnants of his past with Laura. The house he had renovated to become their home now became a space for personal renewal. He did this by removing every trace of Laura's presence, every photo, every memory. He transformed the environment to reflect who he was now, a man who, though wounded, was ready to move on. The emotional impact Laura had had on him was still profound, but Adam chose not to dwell on the bitterness. Instead, he embraced new passions, fostered genuine connections, and let himself believe that rebuilding his life was indeed possible. Then, by chance, Adam met someone who reignited his passion. Their conversation was relaxed and easygoing, and it made him feel like a normal person again. Little by little, he started to explore this new possibility, knowing that he was now stronger and less naive. One day at work, Adam got a letter from Laura. He read it with the serenity of someone who had already overcome pain. On paper, she apologized again, confessing how much her life had changed since the end of her marriage and the constant regret that consumed her. The letter was a desperate plea for forgiveness, but Adam read it without any desire to respond. He understood in that moment that his time with Laura, while meaningful, was part of a past from which he now felt free. With a gentle gesture, he tucked the letter away and decided to move forward without looking back. Meanwhile, Laura was still in her lonely routine. She tried to find a way to live with the regret and guilt, but the loneliness was relentless. As she watched life go on around her, she realized what she had lost. She had lost not just a husband, but also the possibility of a real, solid life. Now, that possibility seemed unattainable. The pain of betrayal felt like a heavy weight on her heart, and the memories of the past, though painful, reminded her of a time when she was happy without realizing it. She had always been someone who had been longing for new experiences and adventures, but now all she wanted was to find that one thing she had never been able to find with Adam. In the end, everyone followed their own path, but in different ways. Adam found the strength to start over and rebuild his life on a new, solid foundation, while Laura lived in the shadow of the past she had destroyed. What did you think of this story? We'd love to hear your thoughts and reflections. We're curious to know what you thought and what you think about each character's journey. And don't forget to subscribe to the channel so you can enjoy more of these heartwarming stories. And, as always, we're here for you and we don't support any kind of cheating.